Welcome, everyone, to our episode 89 of our podcast, Cultivating a New Generation. In today's episode, the second of this 2023, we are going to talk about a topic that is going to help you throughout your life and throughout this 2023 to make it more meaningful and mindful. So we are going to speak about making mindfulness simple, fun, and effective. And my honor guest is Ken Caputo. I'm going to introduce him. And Ken is a business owner, teacher, and entrepreneur. He has been creating and implementing unique ways to positively impact communities for over 30 years. His journey began as a martial arts school owner and operator, and with the help of an amazing team of instructors, he works side by side with families and educators to create a facility that serves as a resource for the community, as well as a place for learning and growth for both children and adults. The years of investment in community kindness and education culminated in the creation of Quester's Way, a 16,000 square foot multidimensional family center. Quester's Way is a brand new style of family destination with an indoor playground, healthy foods cafe, and 5 classrooms full of fantastic learning and growth opportunities for all ages. Its goal is to help families have a safe, fun place to learn and grow together. In addition to founding Quester's Way and building martial art school, Ken has helped design and launch everything from a full-service fitness center to a community art gallery. He has taught graduate-level courses as an adjunct professor at the University of Connecticut and has worked closely with both schools and businesses to help them establish deep, meaningful connections with their community as well as with each other. Central to all of these creations is the Momentum Learning Systems, which is tested and refined through decades of teaching. The Momentum Learning System is a learner-centered approach to teaching everything from breakdancing to painting, empowering students of all ages to explore a variety of ways to move, think, and connect with others in a powerful way. It has a unique process learning that is packed full of tools designed to make learning fun, rewarding, engaging, and energizing. Through all of Ken's business and ventures, he has always believed that one of the most valuable skills we can develop is our ability to learn and adapt to ever-changing world. Learning shouldn't be a chore. It certainly shouldn't end when we finish school. Becoming a lifelong learner opens many doors. It can help you become your best self, do your best work, and live your best life. Ken now works with a growing number of businesses, teachers, coaches, and entrepreneurs to help them energize their unique contributions and relationships with their teams through interactive presentations and workshops, which bring together these decades of experience as a martial artist and business owner. He's currently working to bring the Quester's Way concept to a scale and begin bringing centers to communities throughout the US. So, this is a very extensive bio, as you can see, and there is a lot of learning and applying mindful wisdom into the business strategy. So that's how we are going to begin, and we are going to start with the question that we all want to know with our guest. How did you arrive to this process of learning this mindful experience, Ken?
Well, it started actually back in the early 90s when I was trying to figure it out like most people are for themselves. And you're trying to find your way in the world, and you're trying to connect to something that has meaning and value to you. And what's so interesting, I think for most of us, we're looking outwards, so you're going to school and you're looking for the teachers, or you're talking to your parents and they're telling you what career, or you're looking at what car you should buy that'll make you feel good. So there's always these outward facing things that we're exploring and testing and trying to determine, what value we have in the world and how we can feel connected to that value. And I was fortunate enough to start training in the martial arts really as a way to explore what I was hoping would be a better understanding of the mind-body connection. And that's exactly what it did for me. The really interesting part of it, though, was I had showed up for, I was taking classes as an adult. And back then there weren't a lot of children taking classes, but that was starting to become more of a thing. The Karate Kid and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were starting to, bring the martial arts to the United States, for children. And I had just shown up early for a class, and there was a kids class going on. And I saw all of these kids smiling and empowered and engaged and focused on what they were learning and what they were doing. And I just fell in love with the idea of doing that, being able to do that. So I decided to take over a martial arts school that was struggling a little bit in one of the towns in Connecticut. And it all just kind of blossomed from there.
No. So you began as a student of these martial arts, and then you start your way through teaching. That was
Yeah.
the process. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and you're pretty much always a teacher and a student. I mean, it's you learn more from the students and through the teaching of them than you do, through being a student yourself often.
Yeah, I relate to that. And how did you, at such a young age, started to witness those kind of entrepreneurship skills, because you didn't fall for the pathway of the society? So you went for something that was more meaningful to you, that rather than the direct pathway that everyone follows, or most of the people follow.
I think there's actually been a lot of studies about the characteristics and traits of someone who's entrepreneurial minded. And I think that's part of it. It may just be, certain inherited or genetic or just learned characteristics that open you up to it. But I was, at the time I was in college and struggling and dissatisfied with that experience. I just, I was recognizing that I didn't feel like the things that I was doing fit. And fortunately, when the opportunity to basically leave all of that and follow this very unique path, the road less traveled, there's a lot of hesitancy and concern from my family with, making that decision. But for whatever reason, it felt right to me. I knew nothing about business. I'd never run a business. I almost had the power shut off on me early on because I didn't even know how to pay the bills yet. But I knew I wanted to be a teacher, and I wanted to make an impact on the community. But it's an interesting thing, and I've said this to people through the years. It's not for everyone, and it's often someone, they kind of have this glamorous view of the idea of being a business owner or an entrepreneur. It's not glamorous. It's incredibly stressful. It's a tremendous amount of work. You have to be very self-directed, or you'll fail, and I don't think that's a bad thing either, to, fail and then go do something else, and at least have the experience. But in my case, I think I was just fortunate that, events aligned in a way which allowed me to pursue that and succeed at it.
Yeah, and I agree completely. Although my path was the straight on the school and doing those things, I also felt compelled to not follow the direct way in terms of how people decided their lives, just by advice many times, or by the family, as you mentioned. but by what I was passionate to learn also. I was lured by that. It's an inherent need that we have of learning, and something that attracts us and make us, in my case, think more in expanding ways of knowing about the body. That was my passion, no? And in yours was the community and the teaching and the learning and the support system that you felt in love with. And that's a really meaningful path, because nowadays I think that we are going to move more into that path, because people now are realizing that the direct pathway is not always as rewarding or as fun as it can be the other way. And as you mentioned, this warning that you gave is very important, because many young people think that it's just easy, it's your business, or it's going to be your business, and then you are going to earn a lot of money and you are not going to do anything. You are just going to leave the business there and move by itself, and that's it. If it were as easy as that, there would be a lot of businesses around
Yeah.
and successful people around, and that's not the case. So what do you think that mindfulness in particular have to do with that? Or how did you learn this mindfulness technique? How can you explain the accepting people what is mindfulness and why is helping you in terms of having more intuitive skills?
So I was very fortunate here as well. So not all martial arts styles incorporate like meditation, mindfulness. I mean, it's probably there in most of them to a degree. In my unique case, my mentor, his name's John Fritz. He passed away about a year ago. I miss him every day, but he was incredibly immersed in all of, especially the Eastern traditions, but he even brought in South American and North American shamanism. He studied a lot of the meditation techniques and the underlying philosophies behind all of these things, and he was distilling out the functional pieces, and then he would apply that, help you learn how to apply it in your martial arts practice. So really what you did was you learned to be very present, so that you weren't just doing physical movements, you were connected. Like one of my favorite sayings that he had was, it's when your head and your heart are singing the same song. And and the idea would be, let me show you a way to breathe and move your body through qigong or tai chi, one of those traditional methods. And he would often tweak it to make it what he felt more functional and effective in the real world. So you practice these things, and what you'd find is, in the process of practicing these things in a classroom, you'd start to notice that these things are around you all the time. So mindfulness can be as simple as opening a door and walking through it, or pouring yourself a cup of coffee and then sipping it and noticing the taste. And so it's not something that's separate that you go and do and forget about and then come back to. It's integrated, in all of these little ways throughout your life. And he taught us to be intentional about that. So I was very lucky that he kind of shared that. And over time, he and I developed a really close relationship. He was interested. He worked with just a few individuals through his life, and he did some really cool things at larger scale. But for the most part, especially later in his life, he was just kind of sharing all of these things that he would study and explore. And then I was taking them and I was finding ways to implement them into a person's busy life. When you have a family and you have a job and you don't have time, and your relationship with time is such that this feels like it becomes stressful trying to practice not being stressed. so that was the idea, is how to weave these simple tools that you could practice into your daily life, so it just became part of who you are, not a separate thing.
Mm, okay. And in terms of the attention span that right now many of the young people have, and how to deal with that kind of um, distraction world, what would you, or what are the techniques that you recommend in terms of, for example, for children to um, a little bit reduce the level of distraction that they sometimes have, more now than they just uh, a year ago, more or less, they returned to their classrooms and they are used to a lot of distractions because there was a lot of interactions with the parents, with the job of the parents, and they had a completely disruption of their environment. So what do you suggest in terms of these distractions for children?
So we work with a lot of kids, we have for a lot of years. And, one of the things that's really interesting is for many of them, if they don't know what to do, they're just going to do something. So a lot of times what you have is a void. They're having an emotion, for an example, and they're having the emotion and they're sort of recognizing maybe that they're having the emotion, but no one's taught them like something to do with that emotion. So they either try to suppress it or they act on it and they, yell or cry or, hide or whatever it is, right? There's going to be some kind of reaction. So what we do is we give them, when they're in a more balanced state, some practices that they can try. So for example, a very simple one we'll teach the kids is belly breathing. So, and this is just diaphragmatic breathing. And when they're having fun in class, or we're doing an enrichment program or something like that, we just teach them how to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth and feel their belly expand as they inhale and squeeze their belly in as they exhale, right? So, and then we'll have them physically touch their hand to their stomach as a signal that this is something that they're now going to practice. Now you link that situationally for them. So you ask them, when's a time when it feels like your emotions are bigger than you are, for example? And they're like, oh, when I'm in school and I don't understand what the teacher is teaching me. It's like, okay, so let's pretend that's happening to you right now. Put your hand on your belly. And that's the only thing you have to remember. And that triggers a chain of diaphragmatic breathing, a sequence of things that they do that leads to diaphragmatic breathing, and that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and the rest of it kind of takes care of itself, right? So it's really just, it's, if you think about the practice of the martial arts, the whole idea is you go into a martial arts school and you simulate stressful events. Someone's trying to punch you in the face. Someone's trying to grab you. So, but you're doing it in a safe environment where the focus is on learning better skills than what you currently have. So if you've never blocked a punch, you're not going to know how to do that. So you're going to flinch, or you're going to do something less skillful. So now you go into a dojo and we teach you a different response, and then you train it until it becomes a habit. Now the odds go up that if you were to face that in your life, you're going to do something different from your currently, your previously unskillful reaction. So it's the same thing with mindfulness. They don't, and adults, it's the same thing. They don't know what they don't know. And just telling them calm down doesn't help. That's not a tool, right? So instead you have to give them a tool, but then you have to simulate practicing the situations where that tool would be helpful, so that the association is there when they need it.
Okay, that sounds very creative in the way that we are filling the void that you mentioned, no?
Yeah.
With the practice, with the, and you are complementing skills, because there is visual people, there is kinesthetic people, there is audio people, or um, a lot of different kind of learning systems. And by doing these kind of techniques of just touching the belly in the time that you are feeling the emotion, also recognizing that you are having an emotion of probably anxiety because you are not understanding what the teacher says, but they don't know what it is. And they touch their belly, and that activates a reflex of breathing. Then that literally that oxygen is going to enter and is going to release and relax the system, as you mentioned, activating this parasympathetic system, which, by the way, it is very helpful that you mentioned that, because listeners of this podcast like the science stuff. So this science explains that when you activate this parasympathetic system, your body innately it's going to relax, is going to move forward to a state of being at peace. And many of the functions that you have, which are also the functions of your brain, are going to be released in terms of paying more attention and just letting the moment pass, letting the emotion pass.
Yeah, and that's kind of a key as well. It's helping, and again, I mean, we're talking about children, but it's just as true for adults. It's the emotion is the emotion, and like, I mean, Dan Pink in his book Drive talks about it. He refers to it like the elephant and the rider. And the elephant is our emotions, and then the rider is like our intellect and consciousness. You don't tell the elephant what to do. You try to steer it as best you can. And you don't have a tremendous amount of influence over it. So, and often, I'd have people come to me and they're feeling like they're not able to control their emotions. And the question is, well, who does that?
Yeah.
You can control your, how you think about those emotions. You can control your relationship to it. You can learn to control your actions, as a response to that emotion. But, some kids would get very frustrated because when they would have trouble with something, they would cry. And it's like, that's just how you're responding. You're sad and frustrated that you didn't succeed the way you want, and your response is crying. So, and if you want, maybe there's something you can learn to do instead. Maybe you can learn to laugh, and maybe over time you'll start to laugh at those difficulties instead of cry. I don't know, but right now, don't beat yourself up over the feeling that's being evoked. That's just being human. So,
Yeah.
and it's, you shift that paradigm, and that's like often the first part of mindfulness. It's being mindful is just recognizing and noticing the state that you are in the present moment. And I think a lot of people are thinking, mindful means they're in control of that present moment. And you're not. You're just able to notice it. You can become aware of it, but then over time you can be more skillful about what you do with that information, that signal that's coming to you.
Yeah, and I was thinking about the example of the martial art. Whenever someone is trying to punch you or to attack you, and as you mentioned, when you are not skillful, you are going to freeze, and you're going to scare, and that is going to activate the opposite system of the sympathetic and nervous system, and then you are in trouble because the other person, of course, knows a little bit more in terms of the things that it's doing to hurt you. But if you just, as you mentioned, repeat and repeat the technique of knowing what to do or how to respond to a punch or to an attack, you are going to master and create a habit of how to respond to those kind of situations, which is the same that you are doing in your mind. You are creating a habit of perceiving what is happening, recognizing what is happening, and then producing a better response, no?
Yes, and I think the key is for people to think in terms of you're making investments in advance of needing the skill in a difficult situation. So, so if you're practicing some form of mindfulness, do it in a safe, relaxed environment. when you can just really feel comforted. You can really feel aware and grateful for the breath, or grateful for, you know, the sounds you're listening to, maybe whatever it may be for you. And you practice that. Now you're growing and strengthening this refuge that you can move towards when the environment around you is more stressful. So one of the metaphors my teacher would use a lot is thinking like, you know, if you're standing on the beach and you see a giant wave coming over you, and all you can do is stand there and watch it come crashing down on your head, there's not a lot that you can do about it, right? But if you practice surfing and you went out in the ocean and you learn to surf small waves and you learn those skills, and over time you improve your skill and capacity, that same wave becomes something you actually look forward to. And the wave hasn't changed. It's just your skill in surfing that wave, navigating that wave. So, and that didn't happen by just getting out there on the big wave and hoping it works out for you, right? You could try it that way, but
Yeah.
it's really about these small little micro investments. You know, my teacher would say, make small, frequent visits throughout the day. So it's, you know, noticing a little time when you're feeling good because you just got to sit down after work and you're just grateful that you got to sit in your home, and you take 3 breaths and you connect to that moment. Or, you know, and then from there you can start thinking about things like, you're late to work and you're at a traffic light and you're waiting for it to turn green. Can you remember to breathe until it turns green? You can't do anything anyway. So can you take that moment and make it a mindful moment before the light turns green, and then you move on? So, you know, you find those little ways, and that's the idea, to make it, you know, simple, fun, and effective. It's these kind of micro bites that you take more and more often throughout your day.
Yeah. So a recommendation for these kind of children or adults that start feeling any kind of, let's not say negative, because they are not negative emotions in my view. They are just emotions that are trying to give you some feedback about something that you did during the day, or probably you just have to stand up and give a tour around your house and relax a little bit, which is something that we can do in the small activities. And by incrementing those activities, we are going to innately create a habit of, every time we feel that uncomfortable situation or emotion, we are going to learn to do something with that, not just to witness the negativity and then make it bigger, no?
Yes. Yeah. And one way to, what's helped me, as a lifelong athlete, one of the things that's helped me is thinking in terms of, so let's say that you're a golfer and you make a bad swing and you hook the ball off into the water, or whatever. I'm not actually a golfer, but it's a good man. You know, when that happens, the thing you do is you then recreate the circumstance and you try to make a more skillful swing. You know, and you'll see like the professional golfers will even do that. They'll, like, you know, they have a bad swing, and then before they even leave the tee, they visualize swinging again and watching the ball go where they wanted it to go. So, you know, I think that we forget we have that ability. So you get to the end of your day and you're thinking back on a situation. Maybe you snapped at a coworker. And for a lot of us, if we reflect on that, we're judging it. You know, we're frustrated either with them for making us snap at them, or frustrating with ourselves for losing control. But if you're thinking it like an athlete would be like, okay, that's a quantifiable situation that I can now replay for a different result. So I'm going to vividly imagine what they said to me that led to me snapping at them, right? And maybe lashing out or whatever. And I'm going to recreate the feeling, and I'm going to breathe through it and imagine that that I smiled at them instead, or whatever it is that you would have preferred to do. So again, it's taking conscious control of the mindfulness practice is something that you can access in nonlinear time. You can relive your life. We do it all the time, so you can, come back to that memory and then retrain yourself. And how much does the likelihood go up now that if that situation or something similar comes up again, you'll have a more skillful response?
That's a very good way of replaying it in your mind. And that leads me to ask the question of how powerful is this kind of visualization techniques in order to segment the different kind of moments that you are going to live throughout your day. And those moments are going to help you to create a more mindful experience of the whole day, no?
Yeah.
Do you apply it in the martial arts? Do you ask your students or children to visualize the movements that they are doing?
Yep. Yeah. Yes. And I mean, there's been a lot of studies about that. Actually, you would probably know more than me. It's the nervous system doesn't really differentiate between something you do and something that's vividly imagined. Like its programming is very similar. And it's funny, there's the kind of health cultivation practice of Tai Chi, which is the more slow moving stuff. What I was taught was over time, the form has some physical benefits, but as far as the energetic, the mindfulness benefits, over time, you can just think of doing the form and have the same feelings of relaxation, the same brainwave patterns kick in, the same, the vagus nerve kicks in. All of those things happen without you while you're sitting on the couch, because you've created such a strong mind-body connection that even visualizing the body moving through the movements creates that impact. So with students, we absolutely help them learn to do that. So they'll just sit quietly and they'll visualize doing a sequence of movements, and then they'll get up and they'll do it. Then they'll go back and they'll correct, they'll visualize correcting any flaws that they perceived in that movement. And then they can repeat through that cycle, that rhythm, as much as they want. And, bring it back to mindfulness as a skill in your everyday life. It's really about that. It's about, investing the time in practicing an environment that's controlled and safe for you, and then having the experience. Just go live your life and test things. And sometimes it'll work out, sometimes it won't. So now the things that you're unsuccessful with are the most beneficial. Those are the gifts that you can now go back to, and you can practice it. And it always struck me, I used the term skillful and less skillful a lot, because it was someone who studied Buddhism was sharing with me once, there's no good or bad. It's just skillful and less skillful. So you didn't have a bad response. You just didn't have as skillful of a response as you would choose to have. And you're capable of practicing to make it more skillful. You do have control over that. And if you're in a really difficult place in your life, it can be hard to believe that. But if you start making those little investments, it just sort of happens, even if your best efforts are trying to keep it from happening. It's like if you've never lifted weights and you start lifting weights even a little bit, you're going to get stronger, even if you don't believe that lifting weights is going to be good for you. Your muscles are going to respond. Your physiology is going to work to your favor regardless. So you don't have to get caught up in believing in it so much. You just have to be willing to take a few quantifiable steps and then see where that leads you.
And yeah, I just thought about a moment that I lived the last year. Well, actually, it was almost 2 years ago, when I got I just recovered from COVID. I had a very weak body. I really I lose weight. I lose practically all my stamina and my performance in terms of the activities that I did, running, swimming. I had to start from zero, like if I were just a rookie in terms of the things that I was doing.
Yeah.
And I was incrementally doing it because I didn't want to pressure my body. I said, no, this was a very heart disease. This was a disease that was different to the whole kind of diseases that we have had. And I will treat my body in terms of knowing that I will get to where I was, but just in terms of every day doing a little bit more and pushing a little bit harder and just making one rep more, or I don't know, 200 meters more in terms of running, or 100 meters more in terms of swimming. And that's how I started to add the momentum and add the strength again. And I felt my body after 1 or 2 months that it was already much more strong or stronger in terms of the kind of repetitions that I have to do, and the endurance practically. So doing that in practically all of your life, as you mentioned, it's going to lead you to make those increments, although they may seem ridiculous to other people, just enough for you to start gaining strength and confidence, no?
Yeah, you know, that's such an interesting thing for people to recognize too, the the seasons of your life and the fact that we cycle through times where, you know, everything's going strong and we feel great, and then circumstances happen, you know, illness, injury, some kind of difficult situation, you know, a divorce or, you know, a death. All of those things happen. And I think whether it's physical or, you know, something like meditation or mindfulness, it's okay. You know, we would always say the journey is the home. The
Mm.
point isn't that you're going to get somewhere. I remember someone telling me a story once about a reporter interviewing the Dalai Lama and asking him if he was enlightened. And he looked and kind of smiled and said, "Not at the moment." And I love that because it was just in just a few words. It was like, this is not something you achieve and then look down on everyone else. This is a
Yeah.
process that you choose. And, you know, prior to you getting COVID, you had invested a ton of time and energy. That's not a race. You carry that with you. It just happened that you went through a little winter season there where, you know, you had to kind of huddle down and recover, and then you had to rebuild. And that's okay. You know, I think honestly in meditation, we used to call it spiritual weightlifting. And the idea would be, you know, when you'd forget for a while and you realize that you hadn't done any breathing, or, you know, you were just in a state of where your sympathetic nervous system was maybe a lot more active than, you know, you would like it
And
to
the other
be.
one.
Now you come back to it. You come back to the things that you practiced previously and you gain that strength. Not only do you get back to where you were, but often you end up stronger on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you certainly learn things about yourself when
Yeah.
you're coming back from something like that. I'm sure you had some insights into what the exercise did for you and the value it brought to your life because it was taken away temporarily.
Yeah.
So it strengthened your relationship with it, I would assume.
Yes, it was a very enlightening experience, I would call it,
Yeah.
because I had the time while I was sick to miss the activity, to miss the strength, to miss the healthy experience, to feel that vitality and those things. And I was grateful just to do very simple things that otherwise I wouldn't have been grateful of them. And
Yeah.
recognize that having those kind of things, like just being able to do your own chores in your house, being able to eat the way you eat, being able to sleep the way you sleep, all of those things that many people just, well, and being also myself, take for granted, you don't recognize them until in a moment it goes away, everything, and then you return to them and you value them more. You appreciate more that kind of time and that kind of strength. And as you mentioned, you become stronger because you are now making it from the ground again, but you have a memory of what happened in your body, and that adds up. That's momentum that is going to add, that is experience, that is repetition.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're saying that. There's a gentleman I worked with, he's an acupuncturist and herbalist, and really, really smart dude. And he said, when you become present, you recognize the extraordinary, and the extraordinary can be in just the ordinary. Like, I talk a lot, I love coffee, and I'm always sipping from a broken cup. Right now it's not broken, but at some point this cup isn't going to exist in this form anymore. So it's just grateful for the fact that I'm able to have coffee and to sip it in this moment. So, and then you've got what you experience, which he would call the extraordinary and the wounded. So, when you're in a less than optimal state, and what you learn from that. I remember at one point I had a grade 3 tear, AC tear, so I couldn't use my right arm for almost a year before it was fully healed. But how hard it is to tie your shoes with one hand.
Yeah.
So it's something I definitely took for granted. So you learn how extraordinary it is to have the ability to use both your hands effectively. And then the one that I think we tend to think about the most is the extraordinary in the extraordinary. And, but also recognizing that when it happens. And I always like that, because it gives you the ability at any moment to think, I don't feel mindful at the moment, and then just connecting to your breath, to your senses, whatever type of practice you have. And now you just plugged into the extraordinary. And the question is, how does it express itself? Wounded, ordinary, extraordinary, but it's there, and it's all extraordinary if your view is that it is. And that's a very powerful thing to recognize, because now it's like you always have the present moment. You always have mindfulness just sitting right in your back pocket. It's just a matter of taking it out.
Yes, yes. And it is just, as we were discussing previously, the power of owning that it is our own picture. It is our own set of scenery, and our own set of behaviors, our own set of responses that we are creating moment by moment, that are going to be replayed into a movie, and we can pause, and we can rewind, and we can learn, and we can replay those situations with a different kind of character that is ourselves, but wiser, no? In terms
Yes.
of giving a response that we would have loved, and we are rehearsing for the situation that is going to be present again, because that's life. And as we mentioned, they are seasons, no?
Yep. Yeah. And this stuff can get really deep, and it can get very complex. And I've done weekend workshops where 12, 14 hours of just meditation, and just your brain feels like oatmeal by the end of it. And you don't ever need to do that. It's great if you want to explore it, but I think for most people, especially if I'm just working with teachers or a team of like for an organization or a business or whatever, I actually give them 4 circles to think about, that they can kind of step through. And when they start to integrate, it's a very simple way to experience what we're talking about. And you just think in terms of breath, shape, connection, and view. And, breath is just the becoming aware of your breathing. And there are different ways you can breathe, but some of us very instinctively, when we're in crisis, we change our breathing. Right. And that's the part of us that knows that that's one of the way access points to becoming more mindfully aware of the state we're in and what we want to do about that. Shape is another one. The way you sit, the way you stand, the way you walk, the way you lay down. So, and you'll see that with some people, when they're under stress, they'll change their shape almost subconsciously. So they'll sit up, or they'll bring their shoulders back, or they'll say they've got to walk and think. They're trying to access mindfulness through the shape of the body, right? So you can change the way you breathe, you can change the shape that you're in. Connection are your senses. So we teach one thing that's visual, it's called open focus, where kind of pick a point in front of you and you expand your awareness out to your peripherals, your left and right, and you try to hold that. So you're kind of seeing more of the room, and that has a natural relaxation response. So you can connect your senses intentionally to your environment, feeling the chair underneath you, feeling coolness when you breathe in through your nose, and a sense of warmth when you breathe out through your mouth. It just lets you feel like you're not this isolated being, you're a being that's in connection with the environment around you. So breath, shape, connection. And the fourth one is view, and it's the perspective that you're applying. And in one of your podcasts, you talked about the sky mind, like noticing things as your thoughts as the clouds that are going by. And often we get so caught up in the clouds, we forget that we can make our mind like the sky that's holding all the clouds. And the clouds are just temporary, they come and go, right? So, for some people, that's the first thing they need to do. They need to talk themselves into seeing the situation they're in differently, right? So they'll tap into gratitude, or they'll want to understand the feelings they're having. So that's the view part. So what we teach people is just remember those four things: breath, shape, connection, view. And then over time, learn to kind of let those things interact with each other and overlap. And then all you need to do is set an intention at the center. So what is your intention? Regardless of how stressful this is, my intention is to be kind. Regardless of how stressful this is, my intention is to be firm and maintain my boundaries, right? So, and that will inform how you breathe, the shape you hold, the view that you take, and your connection to your environment around you. So, so that's, I do this little workshop, and we just kind of teach that so that it can be, it's actually very deep, but it's also sort of surface, where it doesn't take a lot to remember these things, so that, just a little bit of practice. And then the more you play with them, the more skillful you get at them. And now we're back to that.
Yeah, I love that, because also, and coincidentally, these 4 steps fall with the seasons of life, the seasons of nature, which is winter that we are entering right now. Well, in the north hemisphere, let's say, because the south is the opposite. But the winter, where we have to replenish, where we have time to reflect, where we can have time and be more compassionate on the efforts that we are asking. And many times the society tendencies or trends push us to move into a different direction of beginning the years with that eagerness of doing things and starting things, but in a rhythm that is not your natural way, because you are in winter. You are in winter, and you're starting to relax a little bit, starting to replenish many of the things and get rid of the other things. And then we will enter spring, and then we will enter summer, and then we will make things fall into one of the last stations previous to winter. So if we follow those stations that I spoke in another episode, we would be more attuned to our own rhythm of life, and we would
I totally agree.
We would be more compassionate, and we would achieve more with less, I would say.
Yeah. Yes. That is so true. You see it so much in athletics and entrepreneurism, where a lot of times they get caught like revving the car engine all the time and feeling you need to go and hustle, grind, train, when really what you need is recovery. You have to have the space for winter, and you need sleep, you need nourishment, you need to unplug. All of those things are so important. But you're right, societally, I think we kind of get seduced into believing that I so many times I'd hear an entrepreneur say, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And it's like, well, that's going to happen a lot sooner than you probably want it to if you
Yes,
keep thinking that way, you know.
that- yes,
So, but we're
yes.
kind of trained that we wear it almost like a badge of honor instead of thinking in terms of seasons. And even in our day, you can have all four seasons
Mhm.
represented in a single day. It's kind of a
Yes.
cool metaphor like that.
Yes, it is because when we wake up, we also want that we are practically to the full power, and that's not the way it has to be. I mean, you
Yeah.
have time. You are pressured just because you have well, commitments in those terms, but you can split those commitments into little pieces, and probably you can find some time to relax a little bit in the morning and take some time for you to sip that cup of coffee, to just do 3 or 4 breaths of air and do those things in order to visualize your day. And just that changes the whole mindset, no?
Yeah. It's interesting as you say that. The One of the things I was taught is the way you begin will kind of set up whether you'll have a place to go back to as your day progresses and unfolds. So one of the things we practice is in the morning, when you notice that you're awake, before you get up, take 3 to 5 breaths and just set yourself up, recognize what's center going to be for today. Where's the place I want to come back to? Is it going to be kind of a calm, focused day? Is it going to be an energetic, curious day? And just reflect on what you're thinking your place of center is in those first 3 to 5 breaths before you get up and start moving. And it's really interesting. When I forget to do that, I definitely notice a difference. Like I'm more influenced by the events of the day in ways that I would have not chosen. Whereas if I remember to just pause in those first few breaths, I tend to be more conscious of the events that are happening and how I choose to let them influence me throughout the day. So I found that super helpful, and bridge breathing is a great little exercise. You lay on your back, you put one hand on your belly, one hand on your chest, and you breathe so that they rise and fall together. And you just kind of notice that rising and falling. You let your body feel like it's kind of heavy a little bit as you exhale. It sinks into your mattress or whatever you lay on. And then you feel a sense of expansion as you breathe in. Just 3 to 5 breaths like that, and just reflect on, who do I choose to be today? And then let that guide you. And it can change too, as that's okay. You don't have to hold it too tight, but it at least gives you a place of beginning that's probably more balanced than if you just jump up and start running around, which we've all experienced that. It doesn't seem to work very well.
Yes, yes, yes. And I notice also that when you do that and you add one more step that doesn't take you too much time to write the things either in an electronic way or in paper is better, of course. Uh,
Yeah.
you are just going to um, forecast your day. You are going to put it in your vision, and that's the way it's going to be. And also, I have noticed that when I don't do that, my days are not as perfect as I would have planned them, no, in
Yeah.
terms of my vision. And
Well, isn't that incredibly powerful neurologically? The act of physically writing,
yes,
it has like an intense neurological effect that's going to, probably have some residual ripples throughout the day as well.
And you just need a notebook. You don't need the fancy journal that probably there is in the market.
Yeah.
You just need a notebook and your own intention. And I think you mentioned that word previously.
Mhm.
Intention is extremely important. And I think that's the gateway of giving permission to our mind to do something. No?
Yes. Yeah. And it's another thing. I think this is more of a Western thing. We often feel we're kind of a little bit yang based, like action oriented. So it's like, what's my intention? I have to have one. And it doesn't necessarily have to work that way. Sometimes the better thing to do would be to ask it as a question and see what reveals itself to you. So just saying, do I have an intention today? If I had one, what would it be? And then you go back to the breath and you stay open. And it's fascinating how like something will come to you usually. And maybe it'll be an hour later, you're in the shower and all of a sudden it's like, you know what, this is my intention today. You know, it doesn't have to be forced, and there's no right or wrong answer. And you can always change your mind. You have permission to do that. So, you know.
Let's give people permission to do that, because many times
Yes.
we ourselves are the only ones that are incarcerating the things and
Yeah.
making it so like a cardboard game, no, that has to
Yes.
follow certain rules or things that they are not even our rules, no. So
Yeah, and I think it's challenging. I mean, I know for me as a young entrepreneur, it was just I had to be strong, or I had to be tough, or I had to grind it out or outwork other people. And you know, so it's like I'm gonna be awesome today no matter what happens. And over time you start realizing, number one, it's unproductive and not really helpful, but it has long-term residual effects. And you know, and you can say to someone, I'm feeling awesome, and not be awesome because you don't want to project that onto them. But internally, you can admit to yourself, today is a crappy day.
yeah.
And it's okay. I didn't want it to be that. And that's what it is. And maybe what I need is a little bit more restoration, and give myself a little bit of forgiveness and compassion with this fact. It's not a failure. It's just, you know, it's just being human today, you know?
I just remember a passage of this book, actually, that I wrote an story about something that happened, that really happened to me, in terms of having a very crappy day back in the, I don't know, probably when I was 22, 23, something like that. I was um, I was fired from the job that I had. I failed an exam in my master's degree, and for the second time. And then I was just done with the day. And I said, the only thing that I want and that I can do now in order to a little bit improve these kind of days, go and exercise. And
Mm.
with that mindset, I went and I swam, and I did a lot of laps and just rehearsing the things. And I started to feel the peace back in my body and in my mind, because I said, well, it was not the worst thing that happened. And when I left the gym, I was a completely different person, and something beautiful happened to me, which was meeting a girl in that season that was very attractive for me. And I never knew that that was going to happen. So
That's awesome.
a crappy day just turned out to be a really beautiful ending of the day. So just crappy days, when you recognize them and you give them that compassion and to do something that is going to nurture you. For me, it was exercise, but for other people can be sleeping. For other people can be having a treat in terms of eating something or whatever it is, just rewarding you with that and making that safe space can turn out the days into a not so crappy day.
You know what's so cool about that is watching you as you're talking about it. For a lot of people, they'd think about it and their body language would shift and they'd kind of slump and they'd feel the defeat again. And you're like face lit up. You're smiling as you're thinking about a difficulty in your life. That is incredibly powerful, I think, for people to embrace and understand. And it's so interesting. Like connection's another one. So you know, you
Mhm.
have a tough day at work and then you go out with friends. And, you know, when they reflect back, if you were to ask someone the story, they'll be smiling through the difficult part because what they're focused on is the wonderful conversation or whatever it was that they had with their friends to balance the difficulty of the day. So that's a really, really cool, tangible story for, how we have control of this. We can't always control the difficulty, and we don't have to feel good about it. But, on the other side of it, there are ways we can take that and, apply leverage to it. So it becomes something that, has less pain associated with it, I guess, on the other side.
Yeah. Yes, completely reshape the moment, reshape
Yeah.
also your mind, and reshape also the energy, because that is for me a very powerful example in terms of knowing that energy is always present and you can transform it. No, it's applying physics to the things
Yeah.
that are happening in your life, because you are going to transform the probably negative energy that you had with the situations that happen, and just through an activity that can be whatever people like to do, change it into a way of letting a little bit of the negative becomes positive, and then giving you a much better end of the day, no?
Yeah, it's funny. There's one of the martial arts expressions we would use is half of all power comes from knowing how and when to relax. And the idea was recognizing that the strongest punch you throw is not because the muscles were all tight. It was we would say loose, loose, tense, loose. It's you being efficient and understanding the process of the sequence of those muscles firing, and not having fire them out of sequence, because then it reduces the amount of power. So, when you're talking mindfulness, when you're talking the sympathetic nervous system, or another good example, we worked with kids like with test taking, and for a lot of them, they'd study, and then they'd have difficulty on the test. And here's for your science crew, the amygdala. If the amygdala is firing, it actually reduces the ability of the brain to recall detail. Because if you see the giant snake on the trail in front of you, you're not going to count the scales. You're going to yell snake, and you're going to run away or throw a rock at it, right? You can't, so if they come in and they sit down to take the test, and the amygdala is firing, and they're all worried about what happens if they fail it and everything, all the studying is only partially being accessed. So we teach them little, left, right tapping on their legs, just tap a little bit and do some of the breaths we've been talking about, open the focus, and just do that for a couple minutes in an attempt to kind of allow the amygdala to calm, so that they were feeling like in less a crisis. And then all of a sudden, the things that they had studied, they're able to recall them more effectively than they would otherwise. So how often is the answer is knowing how and when to relax, to tap into that energy flow that you're talking about. It's there, but you've got a garden hose that you kinked, so all you got to do is let go of the hose, and it will straighten itself out. The water pressure will actually make it go straight. And now it flows better, so stop trying to do something to fix it, and just get out of your own way, and then understand there's tools for that. And breath, shape, connection, and view is the way that we kind of quantify that simply for people.
Yeah, great way to wrap the whole learning experience, because I also have a powerful story about that, because I used to, when I was in school, also to do exercise, do a little 20 or 30 minutes of exercise before an exam, before a test, and then arrive to the test probably a little bit rushed, but I had already performed exercise. So I just innately did that, because I didn't know many of those things back then. And I just took a breath, a very deep breath, and I just didn't listen to anyone about questions or things about the exam, because many times in the school, they tried to ask you some things just before the exam starts. And I said, no, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't know anything. So don't ask me anything. And I was just focused in the exam. And I performed much better than many of my classmates that probably spent their night studying, and they got up in the morning in a rush of giving a little final, I don't know, review of the information, and they arrive
Yep.
very stressful with cortisol levels up to the roof.
Oh,
So
yep. Yeah. And it's so crazy how, I mean, we're designed to dump the cortisol quickly if you give yourself, the space to do it. I mean, we weren't supposed to have high levels of cortisol. That was supposed to be a spike as part of a fight or flight, and then you don't need it anymore, but it's like so often our threats are not so easily quantifiable as something trying to eat you. So, so we have these levels of cortisol that just float. Yeah. So, but if you weren't taught, we're back to that. If no one taught you to notice that, how do you know? Some of us, like you did, figured out ways that worked for you that allowed you to optimize. But I bet you most of those kids, they're coming in sleep deprived. They
yeah,
probably haven't eaten, so they have no nutrients for their brain to consume as fuel to help them perform better. So all the things that would have helped them succeed, they didn't know that they should have accessed those things intentionally to get a better result. And when you don't know, what do? You just keep trying harder at what isn't working, so
yeah, exactly. Keeping more pressure on the system, no?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And eventually
So
it cracks,
yeah, exactly. So what would be in a sentence, let's say, or in two sentences, the advice that you could give people in terms of making mindfulness fun and attractive for them in order to create a powerful life?
So the first,
Mhm.
make a conscious choice to practice the idea of, and it can be anything, mindfulness, prayer, meditation, whatever allows you to pause and feel connected to the world within you and with the world without you. So intentionally make a choice that you're going to practice that in advance of meeting it. And then look for little moments throughout your day, potentially with triggers that allow you to practice it in the act of living your life. So every time you open a door, pause and take 3 breaths before you walk through it, or even 1 breath, right? Little thing, you find whatever works for you. So that would be step 2, look for ways to experience integration. And then step 3 is revisit the highs and the lows, have a little highlight reel of how you did and how you would want to improve it. And that's it. And there's tons of like apps like Calm and Headspace. There are so many resources out there that will teach you if you want to learn more about how to do the breath work or meditation. You got to find what works for you. So there's tons of them out there. Just try a few different ones, find what feels right to you, and that's the one you do. It'll be different for each of us. So
Thank you, Ken. And finally, where can people find you and what can they do to support you in terms of, for example, the Questers Way, which I find amazing that you thought about that idea of connecting families and making them have a space to do pretty much anything they want.
yeah, well, so the big thing with that is we're looking for, we're trying to grow a list of communities. Predominantly right now, we're starting in the Northeast of the United States, but I would love this to become global if I can get the right investing and funding for it. But if someone knows of a community that could support something of this scale, let us know where it is, what town it is and why they think, and at the very least we'll start a conversation with them, because the whole idea is that's a physical resource that we want to place into these communities. It's a safe space where people can go and actually have meaningful human connection that's non-digital. So yeah, I mean, that's the simplest thing with that. I would love to see them be all over the planet, because you can experience learning in a way that is refined through a system that we've developed, but then it's unique to every individual. I mean, we've had people learn how to play Dungeons and Dragons, and people learn to play chess, and people learn how to dance. Whatever you want, we'll provide it. So
Oh, nice. Thank you. Thank you for all the wisdom that we had in this episode. And thank you for allowing these practical steps of mindfulness to the life of many people that I'm sure that they will benefit from these kind of advices and stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh,
Thank
you know, just thinking about it, there was one more thing that just came to mind. We did start doing, like, through our momentum learning system company, we started doing little interactive workshops about things like we talked about today for organizations. So so that's something people can, you know, you just go to momentumlearning.info. And we've started offering these workshops. We used to do them all in person, so we were kind of limited on where, but now we're doing them right with Zoom groups. So if someone's interested in bringing this kind of information to their organization or business, they can reach out to us and we'll talk to them about that.
Thank you. Perfect. So thank you everyone for being here in the episode. If you like, if you resonate with the information, you know what to do. Just forward the information to anyone that you think can be help with this kind of information, and give us a reaction, give us a comment, give us a question to ponder and to answer for the next episodes. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. See you in the next one. Bye.
Bye-bye.